Checking in again here. Okay, couple updates. This is the part of the panel that I did. Let's see, you can, if I really zoom in here, you can kind of see some light scratches. This panel, I did 80, 120, 240. So what I'm actually going to do, and I've started doing on the rest, over here and here, is I'm not going to do 80 anymore. I'm doing 120 to start, and then I'm going to do 240, and then I have a 500. So I think honestly this level of scratching, I don't think that would show through too much on the paint, especially if you're using like a high build primer. I don't think it would come through at all, but I'm not. I'm just going to paint over this since there's enough layers of paint on this car already. I don't want to add another layer of primer. So that's what I'm doing. I'll show you guys how it goes. So ladder getting in my way. Alright, 120 to start, 240, then 500. We'll see what it looks like at the end. I can be the guinea pig. But when you guys are doing this stuff, pay attention. The main thing here is to scuff up the paint. You don't want it to look shiny like this. If you try to paint on top of something shiny and just spray it, you're not gonna have good adhesion. It's going to stick. Or it's not going to stick, it's gonna flake off after a while. Now, the other thing is you wanna get rid of imperfections. So any of these deep scratches like this, when you hit trees and do that kind of crap, you wanna sand over to get rid of that so that when you lay down your new paint, it's pretty smooth. But the other idea here, when you're sanding and prepping for paint, think about where do you see chips the most on a car or truck. Typically maybe by the windshield or around the doors in these areas. That's where you normally see your chips. It's around the corners. So when you're doing that, make sure you sand this stuff very well. I took my sanding block and I shoved it in the crack, and I'm going up and down like that just to make sure you get all the way around and in those corners really well, because that's where you're gonna chip first. Now these areas as well, around your lights, your bezels, stuff like that, you wanna make sure you get these corners pretty well. Now I'm gonna go back around, once I do all the main panels enough, I'm gonna go back around and I'm gonna hit all these little intricate detail pieces is what I call them. The hood's gotta come off before I sand that, but that's just an update, what we're doing here on the sandpaper. One last pro tip on my workbench, very close to my sanding area. You're gonna get dust everywhere, especially if you're using power tools. Make sure you cover your natty light so you don't get dirt in there. That'll degrade the quality and the taste of a beer like this. Same thing with the camera. I don't want to break this guy. It is an old hand-me-down camera, but I'm sticking it inside this box and turning it upside down so I don't mess that up. The other thing is, I'm sanding everything by hand. I wanted to let you guys know that. The palm sander that I was using, it didn't work at all. It was a joke. It was barely sanding anything. I'm having better luck just using the block and doing it all by hand. I think if you had an orbital sander, something that continued to spin, you'd actually make better progress on this stuff. But if you're using power tools, be really careful around corners and edges, because you're obviously going to put a lot more pressure on that area as opposed to everywhere else. So just be mindful of that. Check in on your paint and body work, guys. This stuff is not fun. Plus they're huffing in a ton of solvent with acetone and paint and thinner and a bunch of dust from this crap. Oh man, pay them well and check in on them. They're not doing okay. Time for more updates. We're changing plans once again. We're not gonna do the 500 grit sanding. Everything hurts. I made up an agenda in my head that I have to get this painted by this weekend. So we're just doing 120 and 240, and I think it'll be just fine for my purpose. Maybe if you're doing a show car, different story, but get yourself an orbital sander. Let's get some light on this thing. This is a Harbor Freight guy. It's a Hercules brand. Doesn't really matter. The palm sanders, the idea here, the palm sanders, they just kind of vibrate back and forth like that. And when you put them up on it, it doesn't really do anything. It kind of makes some slight sanding. An orbital sander goes in a full 360 over and over and over again like that. And then random orbital will kind of bounce around while it does it. But the idea is the same. It spins the entire time instead of just vibrating. I feel like the palm sanders, the vibrating ones, they just get dust caught in the grit and then it doesn't really do anything as it moves back and forth 1/4 of an inch. With the orbital sander, it's always moving, so it sands a lot better. Get one of those. It's gonna save you a lot of time doing it by hand. But right now, this is the 240 or 220 grit. So as you can see, hopefully, that right there, this is what we're going for. A lot smoother. So that's after 240. And then let's go over here and look at after 120. So after 120, you've got a bunch of this. Now this has got dust on it too. I did wipe it down with a wet towel, but you see a lot of these streaks, very deep scratches. When we hit it with the 220 or 240, whatever that grit is, it's smoothing it out enough to the point where it's gonna be fine for me. I'm, you know, this is not a show truck. This is an 84 Blazer. I'm going to overland, off-road, do that kind of stuff. I might catch a tree and scrape it up. So I'm not worried too much about it. I just want to get it smoothed out so my entire truck doesn't see these 120 grit scratches in there. And I have painted after only sanding with 120 before. It did okay. You could see them if you looked close. So I'm thinking with the 240 we should be a lot better off.